You are Locked On MLB Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On MLB Prospects, your home for all things minor league baseball. I'm your host, Lindsey Crosby. Thank you for making us your first listen every single day. And we're bringing back one of our favorite guests, Josh Neighbors. You know him from Locked On Nationals. He also runs Locked On Big 12. Like I promised, today is the first of our college baseball previews. We're talking all things Big 12. I wanted to bring in the expert. Josh, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm glad to be here. It's nice that I've been able to make an appearance in both capacities. We did the Nationals one, which I really enjoyed, and now we get to do the college baseball one, which is this is much less of an exact science as the Nationals one felt like, right? That's a bit more easier with the kind of professional, even if they are just prospects. This is the nitty gritty with the college baseball.
Yeah, there is. It's a lot harder to find information about college about college players than it is about professional guys, but there's still some things we can look at, we can talk about. And obviously, when you start with baseball in the Big 12, you kind of have to look at there's 4 teams in the top 25. So good showing. You've got TCU, Texas Tech, Oklahoma State, but everything is headlined by preseason number 1 Texas. And I guess that's what to expect when you just came off a College World Series appearance and a close loss to Mississippi State.
Yeah, I mean, I think people were wondering in 2017 when they brought David Pierce on, like what you'd be getting, right? Bring him over from Tulane and you kind of wonder. But Texas is they are a baseball powerhouse, and you saw it last year. The most well-rounded team for my money in the Big 12 last year. There were questions at times. TCU looked really great, and Oklahoma State looked really good. And as Texas Tech is a really tough place to go in and win, although in the tournament they had some issues at home. But all those teams had some flaws. This Texas team was, from starting pitching to the pen to the lineup, like pretty much a full, strong team that really lacked holes, if you will.
Yeah, and when I was checking everything out and kind of going through the team and looking at my strengths and weaknesses and what I liked and didn't like, it was really kind of hard to figure out weaknesses for this Texas team. I mean, they lost Ty Madden. Ace pitcher. They lost first baseman Zach Zubia, but like virtually everybody else came back, and not everybody had to. Ivan Melendez, last year's, I believe he was like DH of the year. He could have gone pro.
Yeah, he raked.
Yeah, but he brought his 319 average, 13 homers, 51 RBIs. He brought all that back, and he didn't have to. So I mean, it actually turns out you've got 7 preseason All Big 12 players, including 3 preseason All Americans, and I really think one of the big strengths of this Texas team is just the pitching staff, top to bottom. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're kind of Pete Hansen got preseason Big 12 Pitcher of the Year last year, 9-1 record, a 1.88 ERA, and 80 strikeouts. But it's amazing to me how deep all the way through this team is, and how even they added more talent to what was already a really good team last year.
Yeah, their pitching staff's going to be strong again. I mean, you think about, obviously Ty Madden's the guy at the top, but Tristan Stevens and Pete Hansen is the one you just mentioned. But, Tristan Stevens and Tanner Witt and Colby Kubicek, Cole Quintanilla. I mean, they got a bunch of guys who have, got a lot of experience at the college level. The big question is a lot of time. This is the question for every college baseball team is, can those guys who are Tuesday, Wednesday guys become your Friday, Saturday, and Sunday guys? That's always the big question, because you see these teams on Tuesday and Wednesday, they'll play the Arkansas States of the world. The couple times they'll have a matchup against for Texas teams, at least they'll play a Houston, or they'll play the Sam Houston State or whoever, Dallas Baptist, maybe a better example of a good college team you can go and play in the state of Texas. But for the most part, Tuesday, Wednesdays, you're not playing great teams. And so it's hard to judge whether those guys can make the transition, especially when you're talking about a conference like the Big 12, right? And this is a problem that SEC and Big 12 teams have all the time. They've got good young guys, but like if you throw them in there on a Sunday, against LSU, it might get shelled. It might hurt their confidence. So that's really the balancing act. But Texas is pretty well positioned to actually deal with those kinds of problems.
Yeah, and one of the things that really helps a guy make that transition from a weekday to a weekend is the defense. And Texas has one of the better defenses I think you're going to see in college baseball this year. Everybody's fundamentally sound. And part of that comes back to coaching, but part of that's just experience. They have so many guys who have played at such a high level and having such a deep tournament run last year. I feel like a lot of guys they've played so much ball, they've seen so much, and they've all had a chance to correct any sort of mistakes they would have had from the lost 2020 season. And then even bringing in guys, they brought in Skylar Messenger from Kansas. I mean, they bring a guy in who's got experience, who can start right away as well. And so having a great defense just kind of helps with the transition.
Yeah, and last year, in all the defensive categories, they were pretty much better than their opponents. Just across the board, they had a really nice season defensive end, and that kind of goes back to what we talked about. Like, they are the most complete team. There's a reason why they get the preseason ranking of number one, despite whatever happened last season, despite what they lost last season too. And they had a good recruiting class, another top 20 class for them, top 15, I think, depending on where you look, and so. And once again, a couple transfers too, add those in the mix. They should be sitting pretty.
Yeah. And talking about transfers, the next team, number 7, Oklahoma State, 36-19 last year, lost in the Tucson regional to UC Santa Barbara, but really did a great job of going out in the transfer portal and getting guys. And so when I look at this team, I see a team that lost pieces, but still has a lot of talent, one in the transfer portal. And then, so now has a well-rounded, not going to be the best lineup, not going to be the best pitching staff, but is going to be one of the better lineups and better pitching staffs. And the question for me is, how do you take all of these guys and plug them in and make it work right away at Oklahoma State?
Yeah, well, their coaching staff is like one of the – talk about like attracting players and wanting to go and play somewhere. For those of you who don't know out there, so Josh Holliday is their head coach. They have Matt Holliday, who all of us know, is a volunteer assistant coach. And also Robin Ventura is a student assistant. That is his title. I believe he's like, he's back there taking classes, whatever that one is. I think he's still with them now, but at least he was there last season. Like that's a pretty damn good staff.
Is that the new Moneyball of college baseball? Get a
Right.
professional veteran to go take one class so that he can be a student assistant? That is fantastic. I didn't realize he was a student assistant.
Yeah, at least he was last year. So he might, I believe at least, he's on the 2022 staff. So yeah, they bring back Matt Holliday as a volunteer, right? So that helps you there. And that's across a lot of these sports that are non-revenues, is that these people will take volunteer positions. Now, a lot of them will actually end up having some other title with the university, ostensibly, something in fundraising, whatever else. I think he's just probably volunteer because he's made enough money in his career. But Robin Ventura is student assistant, so attracting talent for them is never really a problem for them. Just delivering is what they have to do. And their lineup at times last year was really good, pretty top heavy. And so I think trying to even that out all the way through is the big key for them coming up this season as well. And also kind of evening up that pitching as well for them is going to be a big key, but they do return a lot. So I think they've got a pretty good chance to maybe give Texas a run for their money this year.
Yeah. And a lot of the pieces that they brought in were guys who were coming from a lower level or a JUCO. So Northern Kentucky gave them first baseman Griffer Dorsering. I'm going to try that. JUCO DH and Lyle Miller Green, Haston Merle, the second baseman. And so it's guys who have done it, but not at that level, or a youngster like Victor Medeiros from Miami. And he's the guy I want to get to a little bit later as far as kind of talking about
he's really interesting, isn't he? He's very interesting.
But there's a lot to like there. And so they've got all the pieces. And the question, it's kind of like you said for Texas, who can step up from the weekday to the weekend in the rotation? And then who's going to be that power bat that they need? Because like you said, they were top heavy last year and they've lost some of that. So who's going to be that guy who's going to come in and drive the offense and put runs on the board? And I think they have the guys. I just don't know how quickly it meshes. But like you said, best coaching staff to make it happen of probably anybody in the Big 12.
Yeah, and this league, you're going to have to put up runs. I mean, they get into some shootout. As good as the pitching is, some of these teams don't have that kind of power in the back end of the rotations, and so you're going to be able to put up some runs, at a place like Texas Tech on a Sunday where the wind's carrying out and the game becomes 11-8. So yeah, that is the huge thing for them is can you replace a guy like Encarnacion Strand, and I'm not sure if Jake Thompson's back again, but they've got a whole lot to kind of do there. But they filled the roster pretty well, and that's a team that's going to be active, in the transfer. I guess what they don't really call the transfer portal in college baseball, but going to be active with the transfers.
And you mentioned Texas Tech. I want to get to them real quick. 14, number 14 in the preseason rankings, 39-17 last year, lost the super regionals at
They
home.
got killed. They got
to
absolutely
Stanford.
Killed. Yes.
Yeah. And that's always been kind of the MO of this Texas Tech team is they're going to be good defensively. They're going to get the most out of the guys, and they're going to get a home regional, and then they have a chance to make some noise. And they just got walloped by Stanford. And so the issue that I see here with this team, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the issue I see here is they have a ton of experience on this roster. A lot of guys have played plenty of college baseball, but a lot of these guys were role players. So a lot of these guys, like none of the fifth-year seniors have had more than 145 at-bats in a single season, or like multiple seasons of 100 at-bats. A lot of guys have been, maybe I'll start at first on a Tuesday, but I'm a backup on the weekend, and now they're all having to come in and start. And so what should we expect from this Texas Tech team this year as compared to a typical Texas Tech team?
Well, whenever you have a Tim Tadlock coach team, I think you're going to expect them to, at least when I watch them, I think they're pretty fundamentally sound. They're well coached. He's so well respected, and they really do care about the baseball at Texas Tech. So this is a program that gets the attention, gets the resources, basically gets everything that they need. But yeah, they've got some replacing to do up and down the roster. For them, last year losing guys like Drew Baker is something that's going to hurt them a lot. Cal Connolly, losing him, I think Cole Stillwell and Jace Jung, obviously, are the two big guys returning, but like they did lose a lot last year. So how can you kind of plug and play? Now, I will say the good thing is when you have a guy like Jace Jung, it makes things a bit easier all the way around in your lineup, right?
We're just going to return the Big 12 Player of the Year. It's kind of plugs a hole in the middle of your lineup there.
Exactly.
Slash line of 337, 462, 697, 21 homers, 67 RBIs. The question that I kind of have is, the pitching is going to be good, which I feel like Texas Tech's never really been carried by their pitching, but I think they, at least at the beginning of the season, may get carried by the pitching. And then who's going to step up to give Jace that protection that he needs in the lineup? And that's really the big question for Texas Tech.
Yeah, that's going to be it, is who can you add around him? Because, think about last year, in terms of batting average, actually, it wasn't even top of the team. It was Drew Baker, who hit 343. On base percentage, Baker got on he was 406 last season. Cal Connolly, the guy hit 329. But the key is, can you get those guys in the non-conference good to go for the conference play? Because that's where the competition level steps up. And you need to be able to protect him in conference play, because last year he elevated his game in conference play. Jace Jung did. You have to have everybody else around him do that as well.
Well, if you're trying to up your game, something that may work for you in this new year is a Built Bar. So Built Bar is a protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, might even be better than a candy bar. It's 100% real chocolate, 130 calories, 17 grams of protein. So it's good for you. My wife and I just got a box of Built Bars in the other day. We got the variety pack. So we actually went and drafted flavors. We took all the 9 flavors. I ended up with both peanut butter brownies, but I didn't get either mint brownie. So I'm not sure if I won or I lost that, but I did get all the salted caramels, and she got all the raspberries. So there's plenty of options for everybody. Go to built.com, check out all of the flavors. They have the regular ones and the limited time. While you're there, use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off your order. That's promo code LOCKED15 at built.com. So while we're talking about those top 25 teams, the last one is TCU. And I just want to be real quick on that because I have to get to the coaches poll. But I do find it interesting that the team that lost their head coach is still coming in as a top 25 team. And, 41-19 lost their home regional to Dallas Baptist, which, like you said, is a really tricky school to schedule for a Tuesday when they can go out and beat you in a regional. And I think that TCU looks to me like a very young but very talented outfield, and then a very deep infield with the reigning freshman of the year. They're kind of carrying the load for everybody.
But yeah, for them, the big question is going to be the coach, right? Kirk Saarloos comes in. Now, it's not a huge question because he's been there for 8 years, right? Everybody's familiar with Kirk Saarloos, but he is going to now be elevated to the head coaching position. And so we'll see what comes with that. But this is a team, last year I talked a lot with Steven Simcox, a host Locked On Horned Frogs. It just seemed like they could not figure out their Sunday starter. Like they really just, and sometimes even Saturdays wouldn't even go well for them. Their pitching was just so inconsistent, and it put them in a variety of bad positions in different series. They're such a talented team, but we'll see if they can get that pitching aspect cleaned up this year.
Yeah, and that's just something where you need a guy to step up, and the offense is going to do well. You're bringing back the Big 12 Freshman of the Year in Braden Taylor. You expect him to not have a sophomore slump. You're just kind of given that he's had somewhat of a normal offseason, and so you hope that goes well. And when you look at the coaches poll for the whole conference, was any of this really surprising? So Texas obviously was number one, got 8 of the 9 total votes. Oklahoma State got the 9th vote. Texas Tech, TCU, Baylor, Oklahoma, and then below that, Kansas State, West Virginia, Kansas. Is that pretty much how everybody kind of sees it shaken out, or is there anything that's surprising in that list?
I'm surprised Oklahoma State got a first place vote. I am surprised by that. And Texas just has the consensus right now. So the fact that they even got one is surprising.
I think that was you couldn't vote for your own team. So Texas coach had to vote for somebody else.
Somebody had to vote for somebody else. That would be the one vote. I would have placed it towards Texas Tech. Actually, I feel like that might be the better positioned team. That's just me, though. I'm not going to disagree with Coach Pierce what he's doing there. But yeah, I think this is about what we expect when you get to that middle group. It's actually kind of like football in some respects, the Big 12. You want to know who is that middle team that's going to emerge. But the upper, unlike football, the upper class here is a bit bigger. You have a big four. Yeah, I mean, you have a big four. So the question is, can one of Baylor, Oklahoma, or Kansas State end up kind of making a push? I think Kansas State might be interesting option. Oklahoma's made had a decent amount of roster turnover and brought in some pretty good players too. So I think they could make a push. But yeah, the top 4 is the top 4 here, and this is one of the most top-heavy conferences in all of America. I know the SEC is number 1. I mean, just because they have so many good teams, but you'll be hard-pressed in other conferences to find 4 teams that are this good.
Absolutely, and I think when I look at it, it really looks like there's the Big 4, there's the next 4, and then
poor Kansas.
In the words of Moneyball, there's 50 feet of crap, and then there's Kansas. It kind of feels like Kansas is not really that relevant in the conversation, but at least they have a baseball team.
They do. Iowa State does not have a baseball team.
Shout out Iowa State.
Now here's the question. Would you rather have a baseball team that's just awful, or would you rather just not have one at all?
I'm sure the rest of the conference is happy getting the guaranteed win, but you probably would just rather them not even be there and be able to schedule somebody else out of conference. I don't think it does much for a TV deal or anything. So
yeah, no, I don't think Iowa State baseball is really helping boost that Big 12 Plus, ESPN Plus deal. I will say KU baseball, much like football, is their football team is kind of a disaster. So yeah.
Well, speaking of things that may be disasters, I know that people in Kansas City think that the NFL season's a disaster right now because they're not in the big game. But BetOnline.net has way more stuff to play or to bet on this playoff season. I mean, you can do points scored, totals, player performances, props, where the next fired coaches are going to go. BetOnline is the number 1 spot for all things NFL betting in 2022. And it's not just football. BetOnline.net has basketball, hockey, boxing, UFC, all those odds, best in the business, from sports all the way down to your favorite Vegas casino games. BetOnline is your number 1 online wagering destination. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to wager on all your favorite sports and play your favorite games, because BetOnline is where the game starts. And so, since this show is Locked On MLB Prospects, what I kind of want to do is I kind of want to. There's a couple players that I picked out that are a lot of interest to MLB teams right now. Guys that are draft eligible that we're kind of impressed in, and I kind of want to get your thoughts on some of these guys. I gave some scouting notes as well. I know we've both been looking at these, but you've probably seen them a little more firsthand than I have. The first one's obviously our friend from Texas Tech, Jace Jung. For the pro game, we really see him as an offensive first lefty with power. And I don't necessarily know where in the infield you're going to put him because he has above average ability to play second or third. But I do know that there's a small part of me wants him to get drafted by the Rangers just to get to play with his older brother, Josh.
Yeah.
But is there anything that he can do in college this year to improve his draft stock, or is he just kind of seen as pretty much a finished product?
I would say hit for power on the road a bit more. The big thing about Texas Tech Stadium is that, like, and this is a real thing, the wind really carries. If you go back and watch a couple of their games against TCU this past year, and one of the games he had 2 home runs in, like, he made contact and the ball went out of the park, and it was one of those where you're like, I like to know how far that ball would actually travel in kind of a more neutral setting. It's not like he didn't hit for a lot of power on the road. I think, let's see, I think it says 12 of his home runs came in conference play. I think he hit like 9 of his 31. I think it was 31 total that he hit last year. I think like 9 of those might have come on the road. So there is some questions about
interesting split. Yeah.
Yeah. I forgot how many home runs he hit total last season. He hit 30. So I'm trying to find, he hit 21 total home runs, not 31, 21 home runs. So I forget how many it was, like 7 or 8, kind of 7 or 8 or 9, that range. So, I want to see if that can kind of progress to the point where it's like, all right, this isn't just a Texas Tech is windy, as in April type situation. This is a legit, we know he's got power, but let's see if it was something that keeps on translating elsewhere.
See, this is why scouting's important, because the analytics don't usually tell you how fast the wind is at the ballpark. This is why scouts on the ground still have a place in baseball. That was great. Thank you. Okay, so the next guy, we mentioned him earlier, but Victor Medeiros, the pitcher for Oklahoma State. He's a guy to me that he's got a great physical profile, and his delivery looks really simple, easily repeatable, but he doesn't have a lot of deception, and I feel like he's more hittable than he should be. I look at, fastball, his fastball is mid-90s, has good vertical break on it, but because he has that 3/4 arm slot and his release, it's there. You can see it and you can hit it. His curveball is great, hammer curveball, heavy break on it. But the change, he needs to locate that better. So 3 pitches, good physical profile, good pitches, but he needs to do some more work with them. Is it something where you have the ability to kind of tweak some of the fundamental stuff about your delivery and the way you pitch a baseball in the Big 12? Like, do you have the space and a weekend to do that? Or is that something where he's going to have to fix that when he gets to the big leagues after he's drafted?
Well, I mean, so he gets the preseason All-American honor from, I think it was Baseball America.
Baseball America.
So I guess I was reading what they do is they ask scouting departments, right? They have them give them kids, because if this was a performance thing, he would not be on here, right? This is not somebody who, I mean, he's transferring from a really good program in Miami, but like, if you go look at the results last year, was pretty hittable, and the ACC is a good conference. So I think it's actually it's probably a good thing that he was hit there. It's a good thing that he's staying in a power conference where it's good competition. You go to a place like, I mean, the kids, once again, the physical profile is there. The fact that he throws 4 pitches is really appealing too. I think it's why scouts like him a lot. It's got 4 pitches that he can, whatever you want to say, will throw. I think maybe we dial that back and work on getting to 2 or 3 that we really like and we can use and we're more effective with. And then we can build off. I mean, you know this better than I do, but like, is that something that a guy could, you might tell a guy, he's like, hey, you got 4, but if we're mixing all 4 and we're not getting people out, we got to focus a bit more on 1 or 2 of them, and then we can build our way back up.
Yeah, it's something where you have a time to refine and hone and get better at pitches, and you have a time to actually put up and get guys out. And it feels like maybe a non-conference weekend, maybe a Tuesday or something, maybe that's a time when you can go in and you can, hey, I want to work on a slider, or I want to make this change break better. But something like a Friday night, home against Oklahoma, home against Texas, like, you need to be able to focus on what you can do well and you can get your outs. And I think he's still probably a top 3 rounds draft pick. If he goes out and looks fine, He doesn't have to excel to get drafted. But I think if he does put it all together and he does show the ability somehow overnight to bring in that fourth pitch and have everything look consistent and have some deception to it, he can probably vault himself into, the second or maybe even the first round. So that would do wonders for Oklahoma State catching Texas in the division, but also just for him personally. And then like talking about guys that can do a lot in the conference this year. Peyton Graham from Oklahoma, the third baseman. He's had a really interesting time now because he's a third baseman, but he played some outfield in the Cape Cod League. And the professional projection on him, I kind of see him as a third baseman or a corner outfielder with plus power. And his swing reminds me a lot of Christian Yelich. When you kind of look at the way that he has the little elbow swing and the leg kick, looks like he's modeled his game after that. But the question is, can he put it all together enough to contend for Player of the Year in the Big 12? I think that's actually probably his true ceiling, and I'm not quite sure if he's being talked about as a possible Player of the Year in the Big 12.
Yeah, I think with him, there's just a lot of questions about, because he had a really good start to the COVID-shortened season, had a really good year last year, and so you're wondering, hey, can you take a step forward this year? He's a tall kid. He's a really skinny kid. He's a really thin guy, and he needs to fill out a bit more because he's at 6'4", 171 as they have him listed right now.
Yeah.
So he's got to fill out some more. Because you think about Christian Yelich, he's not like a huge dude, but he is like, he's built.
He's sturdy.
Sturdy, yeah. And so we're getting to a point now, with Graham where he's redshirt, I think, sophomore. So we're getting towards 2021. This is where I want to see that a little bit bigger. Let's see if the consistency will be there. Let's see if the consistency in the field is going to be there too. But if he puts those things together, there's no reason why he can't be. And so that's why that first stretch of the games, early on in the season where you're playing your lesser opponents, you can build up. Sometimes a false sense of confidence actually is good. Like if you're like, man, I am the man, I am great.
Yeah.
That can carry forward for you. Actually be good.
Make it till you make it, baby.
Right. Exactly. You can be like, oh, well, I'm really good. And it doesn't really matter who I'm facing. I'm not saying in any way, shape, or form he'll fake it till he makes it, but let's see if he can kind of build off what he did last year. And I want to see if the numbers from 2020 can hold up. Because it's actually, if you take the 2020 numbers and you were to stack them into 2022 and then play them out, that would kind of actually be a natural progression in terms of the fielding and in terms of the production at the plate. So let's see if he can do that. That's the big question for me.
Yeah. And talking about guys who have that big question about what can they truly do at the plate. Jared McKenzie, the center fielder for Baylor, he's a guy that I've seen two different Jared McKenzies. If you watched him in 2021, it looked like he had figured out the power tool. Absurd slash line, 383, 453, 626, 51 games. He only had 10 home runs, but 35 to 15 strikes to walks. Really looked like he had figured the power out. Then he gets to the Cape Cod League. They hand him a wooden bat, and he bats 228, 316, 245, 36 strikeouts to 11 walks. And it's like, okay, so which one is he? Is he the metal bat guy we saw? Is he the wood bat guy we saw? Or with that small frame does he have? Is the wood bat guy in there somewhere with some time in a weight room and some personal training and development? Where is Jared McKenzie? Which one is more him?
Yeah, maybe he's somewhere in the middle, but he played 50 plus games last year and was dynamite. So it's a part of, a big part of you has to believe, all right, this is
the larger sample is
right. The larger sample is the right sample. Now, once again, there is something to be said, like you said, for his performance in terms of where, that might go and with his pro prospects, but you'd hate to see him come back and that kind of affect him at Baylor. I doubt it does. I think he's going to be right back at home. He's one of the best players in the Big 12. Was the best player. It was a pretty relatively decent Baylor team last season. So somewhere in the middle would be my answer to the kind of question that we're posing here. As a Big 12 homer, I'd like to say more towards that upside, but there are some, this is a guy that's, somebody who's doesn't steal a lot of bases. He gets on a decent amount too. Doesn't hit for a ton of power. So, he's got some areas of his game that he can grow, but it's almost like he's got to refine what he was last year first. Then we'll talk about growing.
Absolutely. And talking about growing, a guy who's done a lot of that, Justin Campbell from Oklahoma State. So right-hand pitcher, also first base, played a lot of DH last year when he wasn't pitching for Oklahoma State. And I'm not quite sure what he ends up sticking at the major league level. His numbers look better pitching, but I've heard from some scouts that he has higher upside on the mound. And so as a pitcher, 2.57 ERA, he started 13 games, pitched 84 innings. His fastball was only about 90, which is not something you see from a guy who's 6'7". So you wonder if there's some development to happen there. But it's got some life to it. It can kind of move around. And then he has a curveball and a changeup. You know, like you said, 2 pitches, both average to above average. If you have 3 pitches that you can throw that are all average to better, I mean, that looks like a pretty decent starter. But I just feel like his numbers were so good batting that I don't want to just pigeonhole him and say he's a pitcher. I feel like he could be a good hitter as well.
Yeah, it's rare to see a kid at this age with kind of the old designated hitter / pitcher on the bio. It gets at this point kind of how specialized we are in a lot of sports, especially baseball. At this point, to be like, hey, we got him at both, and we don't know which one he is yet, right? That's the fun part. Like, is he one? Is he the other? Is he both? Normally, he will not end up being both in most cases.
He had a 2.57 ERA, but he batted .313.
Right. I think the key here is that his performances were very varied. There were some real awesome, great nights for him. There were 2 11 strikeout evenings for him. There was a 14 strikeout evening. There was a 12 strikeout evening against a really good Missouri State team. You also sprinkle in, a couple not awful rough outings, but he got touched up a little bit against some of the better teams. And then you throw in a game, like the no-hitter he threw last year against Kansas where it was 11 strikeout no-hitter. So this guy, I mean, I think the pitching results are good enough at this point to be like, this is something that we have to try at the major league level. That coupled with his frame is something I think, at 6'7", 217, like that's just, you can't really pass up on that in my opinion. For Oklahoma State's purposes, let's see how far we can take the hitting thing, right? But but in terms of professionals, that part, I mean, once again, you know better than me on this one. You'd say that might be great, but like I think if you're a pro scout, you have to be more invested on him as the pitcher because he had really good results in the Big 12. Now, not always against the top teams, but a bunch of good results against teams like Missouri State, and a good outing against Texas Tech too. So it's a guy that, I think that's number one if I'm a pro scout.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy where it feels like if you can just teach him some consistency and give him a good 10 to 12 pounds of weight, I mean, he has the potential to go out there and, I mean, I'm just right now, like a profile as a number 2 to number 3. Some of the performances that he put up, like you said, I mean, throwing a no-hitter, throwing 10 strikeout games, things like that. Like when he's on, it's electric.
He had like 5 or 6, I think, 10 plus strikeout games last year.
It's absolutely absurd. And it's just one of those, like you have to go for that. And then you just have to hope the universal DH is not a thing when you get him to the major league level. So lot to look at the Big 12, like you said.
Yeah, and can I correct something from earlier?
Yeah, go ahead.
Jace Jung, I think I counted it 6 home runs away from Texas Tech last year out of the 21 that he hit. So you do play more home games, which could feed into it, but that I just want to make sure I got that correct. 6 home runs away from home, 15 at home. So we'll see if
that's almost a Colorado Rockies style kind of split there. And that's something where when you're evaluating a pro player, you always look at, the home and away splits and you correct for things like that.
Right.
I don't quite think we're always doing that.
And 3 of them came in one game against Kansas State too. So there's also
of course they did.
There wasn't much variety there.
He really had 3 or, 3 or 4 away.
Right.
So plenty to look at in the Big 12. Obviously, like you said, Big 4 at the top. You've got that group in the middle, 50,000 feet of crap, and then Kansas. If folks want more information throughout the season about how these teams are doing in the Big 12 and how sports in the Big 12 in general are going, where can they find you and follow your work?
Yes, I appreciate you helping me plug this. You can find us on Twitter at LO Big 12. You can find the show Locked On Big 12 wherever you guys get your podcast and on YouTube as well. You guys can find me on Twitter right here at Josh Neighbors _.
And then obviously don't forget also Locked On Nationals. We do talk about that. If you're a National League East fan, actually this Thursday, we're going to have a chat with our friends from the Locked On Braves. And then Friday is going to be our National League East farm preview, where we talk about all 5 farm systems and kind of rank them. So stay tuned for that. But if folks want more info on Locked On Nationals, how do they get that as well?
At @LO_Nationals on Twitter. You guys can find Locked On Nationals wherever you guys get your podcasts as well.
And for Locked On MLB Prospects, I'm Lindsey Crosby. You can follow me on Twitter at Crosby Baseball. Follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Farm. If you have any questions or emails, send them to us at LockedOnMLBProspects@gmail.com. This has been Locked On MLB Prospects.